hopefully we can go ahead and get started. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we are live, and hopefully you're all seeing my screen now. And we will go ahead. Barbara. Uh-oh. Barbara, are you still there?
No,
Nope.
I'm happy to read it for you if you want.
Good evening, everybody. It is April 27th. Oh, no, 26th, 2022.
27.
This meeting is compliant with the Ralph M. Brown Act as amended by California Assembly Bill number 361, effective September 16th, 2021, providing for a public health emergency exception to the standard teleconference rules required by the Brown Act. The purpose of this is to provide a safe environment for the public, staff, and committee members while allowing for public participation. The public may address the committee using exclusively remote public comment options. The committee may take action on any item just listed in the agenda. Members of the public may view the Open Space and Ecology Meeting Committee by logging into the Zoom meeting listed below. Open Space and Ecology Committee meetings can be viewed live and or on demand via the city's YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/Brisbane CA, or on Comcast channel 27. Archived videos can be replayed on the city's website. brisbaneca.org/meetings. To address the committee, the Open Space and Ecology Committee, OSEC meeting, will be an exclusively virtual meeting. The OSEC agenda materials may be viewed online at brisbaneca.org at least 24 hours prior to a special meeting and at least 72 hours prior to a regular meeting. Remote public comments. Meeting participants are encouraged to submit public comments in writing in advance of the meeting. Aside from commenting while in the Zoom meeting, the following email and text line will also be monitored during the meeting, and public comments received will be read into the record during oral communications or during an item. Email aetherton@brisbaneca.org. To join the Brisbane meeting, brisbaneca.org/zoom-osec. Meeting ID 976-4295-0160, passcode 544511, or a call-in number of 669-900-9128. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact Adrian Etherton at aetherton@brisbaneca.org or 415-508-2118. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting.
Thank you, Shauna. Barbara, I just realized I don't know if you could see when I tried in the chat to respond. So
I was kicked out at that particular moment, I think.
Okay. Well, you asked about staying as an attendee because it's kicking you out when we promote you to a panelist. So we wouldn't be able to see you. And I think we would have to have you raise your hand and I would allow you to talk at any juncture. So we can go ahead with that if you get kicked out again. I might suggest that in that case, it would be easier for Shauna to chair the meeting. That way she can keep things moving. But we can go ahead with you chairing if you're able to, so long as until you get kicked out again, a lesson until.
So am I a panelist now?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, it did accept me this time. Okay.
Yes, and we can hear you, but your video is off. But perhaps
I think
things will be more stable if it stays off.
Yeah. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Note for the record that all committee members are present.
Okay. Do we actually need to do the roll call this time?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Can I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda?
I'll make a motion to adopt the
second.
agenda.
I'll second.
And do we vote, right? So
Yes.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Did you get that, Adrian? Usually I call the names, but
Did we have any nay or abstention? Okay.
all right, announcements. Does anyone have announcements?
I'd like to announce that we had a very successful Habitat Day, and thank you everyone for coming and pulling weeds on the mountain. That's it.
I'd like to announce that I also thought it was awesome. All right, World Communications. Adrian, do we have any members of the public with us tonight?
We do not have any members of the public, and I do not have any written correspondence.
All right, may I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
Before we do that, I'm not sure it was totally captured that when we did the subcommittee reports and reorg, that since Jason wasn't there, everything was kind of tentative. I don't know that we need to capture that in the agenda, but
I think you mean the minutes?
I did mean the minutes, sorry. So it's something that I feel like we should go back and revisit unless he is happy where he is and he doesn't want to add or remove himself from any subcommittees.
I'd sort of like to go back on open spaces, given that it looks like there's not a conflict there.
So I think we'll discuss that when we get to subcommittees, but I did have subcommittee reports and reorganization still on the agenda so that we can further discuss who's on what subcommittees.
That's great.
Do we need to make that more clear in the minutes?
Nope, I think as long as we do it today, it's fine. So,
okay.
Thank you.
Was there a motion on the floor?
I don't believe so. Can I have a motion for the approval of the minutes?
I've got an open mic. I'll move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any nays?
Any abstentions?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, new business.
Wow, we moved through that quickly. All right. So our discussion here this evening is to talk about how we will go about meeting the climate emergency declaration goals. I want to acknowledge my OSEC members that serve on the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee, Barbara, Glenn, and Aaron, as well as Karen. We have spent a good deal of time discussing how we can meet these goals. So they definitely had a lot of input on this presentation. So just as a reminder, the resolution was adopted in July of 2021 and, really was intended to make clear that the city is still committed to climate action, even though we have not been able to move forward with a climate action plan update, and to set some updated goals. And I don't think I need to belabor for this committee all of the reasons that climate change is a crisis and why we need to act quickly. But I did want to make sure to have this in here because I think we're planning on this moving forward to city council. And I think it's important for everyone to keep in mind when we're talking about what needs to be done, that there's a very good reason why we need to do these things. Many of you are probably aware that a couple of weeks ago, a new United Nations report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was released, focused on what can still be done to keep global warming from reaching catastrophic levels. And I thought this quote was very interesting from some reporters in the Washington Post that said, "In waiting so long to take action, humanity has denied itself any chance of making the energy transition gradual or smooth." And so some of the actions that are going to be proposed in this presentation are going to seem like they're very fast, and they need to be. So just wanted to kind of mention that and keep that in mind. Oh, animations. Okay. So just wanted to review what the climate emergency declaration says in a nutshell. It recognizes the threat and commits the city to rapid emissions reductions. There's a very large focus on addressing equity and ensuring a just transition, as well as increasing resilience to the climate impacts that are already baked in. Focused on education, educating our residents, and also collaborating with other regional agencies and higher levels of government. Leading by example as a city that has always taken an environmental, commitment very seriously, and setting a budget that will enable urgent action. And the goals that the climate emergency lays out are to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions 66% from our baseline by 2030 and reach carbon neutrality by 2040. You can see that's here in the yellow, and then in the green line, that would be what our targets would be if they were aligned with the state targets of reaching carbon neutrality by 2045. And then blue in historical, it actually looks like a similar kind of trajectory, but a lot of the low-hanging fruit is what has gotten us to this place. And so as we go down this curve, these emissions are going to get harder and harder. So most of you have probably seen this dozens of times by now. This is our 2017 greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Lion's share of emissions are from our vehicle miles traveled. That's our passenger vehicles. A lot of it is from our buildings, residential in the lighter blue and commercial industrial in the darker blue. And then we have solid waste in purple and rail in yellow, and then off-road equipment in orange. And you can see that water and wastewater are very teeny tiny slices. Glenn.
Sorry to interrupt you, Adrian, but that was a good point about low-hanging fruit, and this is going to get harder and harder. I wonder if it might be good to put in a slide about that.
Sure.
With that kind of language on it.
I can make a note of that, and we can come back to that in the council presentation, make sure we have that point incorporated.
Okay. Thank you.
Adrian, could you also define what they mean by off-road vehicles? Is that just like ATVs, or is that all kinds of other stuff?
Off-road equipment includes a lot of things. It's actually largely residential lawn equipment. So things like leaf blowers and lawn mowers, but it does also include other types of off-road vehicles like you mentioned, and some construction equipment, I believe, is also
And agricultural tractors or anything like that, or equipment like surveillance?
That's a really good question. It probably would be, but I don't know for 100% certain. I would think that would be where it is, because when we talk about these transportation VMTs, these are really vehicles driving on our streets. So all of the other things that are driving around that aren't driving down the road on a daily basis are going to be lumped in here with that off-road equipment, aside, of course, from rail, which has its own separate category.
Yeah, I agree that's probably in that category, but since these emissions, I believe, are Brisbane specific and we don't have a lot of farmland or tractors, I would guess that that's probably not a huge part of the orange section, at least in Brisbane.
Yes.
Erin?
Yeah, I'm not sure how to make my hand yellow. It's just very white. What about boats? I hadn't thought about it before, but a lot of those motors on smaller boats are pretty nasty.
That is an excellent question.
Yeah.
I will have to get back to you about that.
And
Or
also,
I'm sorry, I didn't put up my hand. Go ahead.
Michelle?
also, there is, I know this is from 2017, but going forward, there is an awful lot of earth moving equipment on the Baylands soils
Mhm.
processing and storage and other places like that. So we might want to take a closer look at that.
Mary?
I don't know if you mentioned this before, but the data is back from 2017. Do we have any idea where we stand as of today, especially related to the prior slide? I was just wondering.
I have been in touch as we investigated some of these questions that the CAP subcommittee came up with the county staff that works on these. And I have been told that they are kind of doing a final quality check with the consulting team on the next, I believe it's the 2018 and 2019 emissions inventories. Traditionally, there's kind of two pieces to why these are so late. One is all emissions inventories in any city take a very long time to put together because there are a lot of data sources that go into them, and many of those don't make their data available for the year, the prior year until late the next year. So there's a lag from that, and then there's a kind of extra lag that we have in Brisbane because of some of the difficulties in getting natural gas data, especially in our commercial sector. There's some state privacy rules that limit the ability to get data if it's called the 1515 rule. So it's, I believe, if any individual customer represents more than 15% of the data. So we tend to get swept up in that and the county staff that works on this has to do some jumping through hoops in order to get some data for us from the CPUC. So that slows things down considerably.
Yeah.
And I guess, are they working towards hopefully speeding up that?
I mean,
updating data
I don't think
process?
anybody's intentionally being slow about it. Everybody's working on it as fast as they can, but we have these limitations and have to deal with, a lot of this data is coming from MTC and the air district and, state level calculations, and these things just take a lot of time to put together.
Okay.
Hopefully as time goes on, the process will smooth out a little bit, but for now it is what it is. Shauna?
Yeah, actually, I had a question following up on Erin's question. So you were talking about boats, but what about the pollution that those large tankers that are parked in the bay, does that come blowing in, and does that get scooped into Brisbane, or since a lot of them are parked, kind of directly off of our marina?
No, I would assume that would be part of an inventory for the port at which they are, ultimately going to. So probably mostly Oakland, but perhaps some San Francisco, Redwood City, others.
Just curious.
That should be where that is being tracked. I think I've had some kind of regional meetings where representatives from ports were on meetings about climate action planning and inventories. So I believe ports may actually do their own inventories, kind of like a city or a large company does.
Okay, thank you.
I think we'd want to make sure that that doesn't get assigned to us, because Brisbane's is 21 square miles, but 17 of those are water, including where some
I
of these...
can tell you, I have looked through, our inventory is many tabs of a very large spreadsheet that I have looked through many times over the years, and I have never seen anything that seemed to indicate that there was commercial tanker traffic being assigned to us.
Yeah, we just haven't had
Oh.
the parking situation that we've had since COVID started, where
Yeah, I
so
mean,
many
but
of them
at
are
the
parked
same,
here.
at the same point, we have to keep in mind that a portion of those emissions do belong to the residents of this community because we're responsible for the things coming in on that ship, but Glenn?
I was just going to say that international shipping and air traffic are huge gaping, I don't know what to call them, gaping holes.
Externalities.
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of generally externalized. They're not attributed to anybody, as far as I know, even in the national emission statistics. There's a lot of controversy about what to do about them because they're pretty big, but we don't have to worry about them.
Yeah.
Right, they're not being attributed to us, even though some of them probably should be.
Mhm.
There's no formula to do that yet.
Yeah. And there was an inventory that I think it was the Air District and maybe Berkeley worked on together. I know the CAP subcommittee talked about this, at least, if not the whole OSEC a few years ago, the so-called consumption-based emissions inventory, where they attempted to estimate what cities' emissions would look like if we did incorporate all of the travel that residents do on planes and all of the things that we buy and all of those emissions upstream that we don't actually incorporate. And I want to say almost, roughly doubled. Excuse me, what our emissions were. So it's very significant, but it's not something in the current methodologies that are tracked to cities.
And this is part of why we went for 66% instead of a lower number, because Glenn's point of it's going to get harder as we go on, so we might as well take a good run at it up front. And B, I know from doing our previous climate action plans, they're always finding things that they forgot. So if we aim for 66, we might end up at 50 by the time they pile a few more things on us.
That's a very good point, because I have heard from RICAPs that one of the areas that has not been previously incorporated in our emissions inventories is methane leakage. And that is going to start to be incorporated. I don't know if it is in the 2018 and 19 inventories or if that is farther down the road, but it is something that is starting to become more standard part of emissions inventories. And I'm not certain yet whether they're going to be going back and revising our prior inventories so that we can see how that would have changed. But that's something that's going to be affecting most jurisdictions. And I think is really going to drive home the point of we need to stop using natural gas as fast as we can, which is a point that I'll make in a few slides or so.
Yeah, plus 2 landfills, we definitely have methane leakage.
Good.
So Adrian, do you know if the methane leakage attribution is going to be based on measurement, or do you know if they're talking about basing it on a, percentage somehow, population percentage?
I believe it is a percentage based on natural gas usage. So assuming, I want to say it's maybe 4 point something percent. So basically your natural gas emissions would go up by that much, which is going to be significant.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in now to talk about the SPARK tool. This is called Scenario Planning and Reduction Quantification. It's a tool that the new RICAPS consulting team, Rincon Consultants, has brought to the group that allows us to do a little bit more high level looking at our forecasts and look at different scenarios of what could happen if we change this by this percent. And so it really identifies the most significant emission reduction measures and quantifies their impact based on, different numbers that we can manipulate, and compares to state and local target pathways. So on the screen, what you're seeing is in red, business as usual forecast. 2017 baseline is just here in the black. The purple is an adjusted forecast, which includes state and peninsula clean energy reductions. So things that are already baked into existing laws and executive orders and PCE plans. And then in green, we have what the state target pathway would be, and yellow, our Brisbane climate emergency pathway. And I think it's really interesting. You kind of see this inflection point in 2030 in these business as usual and adjusted forecasts. And part of this is because we did attempt to incorporate some preliminary numbers of growth from the Baylands and other developments into these forecasts. So one of the things that is probably a conversation for a much later date, once we actually have some of those numbers more firmly, is whether it continues to make sense for a city that is growing to address, to set goals that are based on gross emissions reductions, or if we should consider looking at emissions reductions that are per capita or per service population. And so that's going to be, I think, a conversation that we need a lot more discussion and guidance on from folks who are involved in higher level emissions and climate planning and regulatory actions and legal and all of that. So this is just a screenshot to give you a sense of what the Spark tool actually looks like. This is what the CAP subcommittee and I worked through, adjusting these percentages to basically try to see if we could get these bars up here that say Brisbane target met, state target met, to say yes. And so what that would look like, actually, I'm going to back up before we go into what that would look like, talk about what those different measures are in the different categories. So in the building category, we have measures to require electrification of newly constructed residential and commercial buildings. We have already largely done that, but we still have a few loopholes. And then electrifying certain percentages of existing residential and commercial buildings. For our very large vehicle miles traveled sector, that would look like developing and implementing active transportation plans to shift vehicle miles traveled into other modes. So when we say active transportation, we mean walking and biking. And then the next line item would be to shift driving into public or shared transit programs. The next is to change those vehicles that are still being driven to zero emission vehicles, and then addressing the commercial vehicles as well. So the passenger vehicles and the commercial vehicles are separate line items. On the off-road equipment, simply electrifying a certain percentage of that off-road equipment. In those very tiny water and wastewater lines, we do have line items to decarbonize certain percentages of those emissions. Because this is such a very, very tiny portion of our emissions, it is really not going to be an area we are going to put much focus. And there will probably be some things that we will do on those, but I imagine that those will be of limited benefit and potentially could get expensive. So there'll probably be things that we'll look at as we get towards the end and try to squeeze out those last little bits. For solid waste, implementing and enforcing SB 1383 requirements to reduce landfilled organics. That's something that has been a big deal lately and will continue to be for at least the next several years. And then decarbonizing a certain percentage of landfill emissions, and those are that the landfill emissions for this line are not the households waste that we're throwing away. This is specifically added for us in Brisbane to address the the landfill emissions from the closed landfill at the Baylands. Most cities don't have this. We had to actually specifically have the consultants add this line in for us so we could try to incorporate reductions there. So what does it look like to get to 66% by 2030? Oh, darn. I thought there were some animations here and I guess they didn't work. Oh, never mind. Next screen they will. Erin, did you want to jump in here first?
Oh, I was trying to call on Aaron. I was muted. Sorry.
Erin, you're muted too.
It's been a whole day of that. Going back to the landfill emissions, I just watched some of those videos that SSF, South San Francisco Scavenger, put out, and one of them was about their composter and how they use the energy created by the composter to power their trucks.
You mean their anaerobic digester?
Thank you, ma'am. Do we get any credit for that?
Yeah.
We do.
So,
and that's going to be more, that's not really in that landfill emissions category. That's more in this similar category up here. But it also, when we do our emissions inventories, look at what our percentages of waste diversion are, and we get some credit for that. And we are very lucky to have Scavenger and have that anaerobic digester. It is going to be very helpful in meeting some of the requirements of SB 1383, and we only wish that they had a bigger capacity so we could do even more. All right, so what does 66% by 2030 look like? Well, we could take a so-called peanut butter approach. I like that term. I think that was Barbara's. And spread the reductions evenly across all categories. So we would need 37% in all categories to achieve a 66% reduction overall. And that 37% may be reasonable in certain categories, but it's highly unrealistic in others. So if you think about shifting 37% of the vehicle miles traveled into public transit and another 37% into active transit, that's very unrealistic. In other categories, it might be too low a bar. So in landfill organics, that SB 1383 line, we already have a very high diversion percentage, high 70s%. So 37% is probably actually low. So we wanted to kind of show this just to give folks a sense of what it would look like to do things evenly across the board, but that's probably not really a very realistic strategy. So looking at it in another way, to get to that 66% reduction, we already have that require electrification of new buildings. Again, we have some loopholes. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. It would require us to electrify 40% of our existing residential buildings and 30% of our commercial buildings in the next 8 years. We would need to shift 20% of our vehicle miles traveled each into active transportation modes and public transportation modes. Of the remaining cars on the road, we would need 60% of the passenger vehicles to be zero emission vehicles and 30% of the commercial vehicles to be zero emission vehicles. We would need to electrify half of the off-road equipment, reduce our landfill organics 85%. Again, I think we put that percentage very high because we feel like that is a very achievable category for us. Decarbonize 25% of landfill emissions. And then again, I didn't put a whole lot into these bottom water and wastewater categories because they don't get us very much. And increased carbon sequestration by planting 100 new trees. I will be honest, I was really disappointed that planting trees didn't get us bigger numbers than it actually did. When I saw the numbers, I was pretty shocked that planting 100 trees. There are a lot of other climate benefits, and planting trees is very important. But in terms of the raw numbers in these spreadsheets, it's unfortunately, even putting that number up to 1,000 doesn't have a very much of an impact. Michelle?
Two things. One, in develop and implement an active transportation plan. Are we taking into account the amount of people who are now working from home and can continue to work from home? I mean, I worked from home for the last 2 years. That is, whereas I used to commute up to 70 miles round trip a day in a private car by myself. And I think that if we could enhance this with either perks or legislation to continue to promote work from home for those industries that can, I think that would really help. And then increase carbon sequestration, the word, by planting new trees. I'd really like to know what that number is, taking into account new trees take a long time to get big enough to do carbon sequestration at the level we need them to do. 8 years, we plant a new tree now, 8 years, that's not a very big tree, but there is a significant increase by continuing to maintain large trees that are already doing this and increasing their health. So I think that's an area we should focus on as well.
So to the first point about work from home, basically all of these percentage reductions are from our most recent inventory, which is that 2017 inventory. So it's going to take probably several more years before we really understand what the impact of COVID and work from home is on our emissions inventories. And we absolutely can and should continue to promote and prioritize not having trips that don't need to be taken. But how exactly that plays into these numbers is we're not looking at 2020 or 2021 as the baseline and saying we need to reduce 40% of those trips. We're looking at 2017 when all of those trips were, generally still happening. So that's something to keep in mind as we look at these numbers and how they change and will continue to change for many years to come. I think Shauna was next.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the line item about the off-road equipment, which you said is primarily the, like lawn equipment, isn't some of that going to be addressed with the new legislation about, mandatory electrification of all those things?
Yeah, we do have existing state legislation that I believe goes into effect in 2024 that bans the sale of new gas lawn equipment. So that, I think that's really part of the reason why I felt comfortable saying 50% is probably not super unreasonable for that category because a lot of equipment will be, those equipment lifetimes probably won't last a whole lot longer than, a 6 or 8 year life cycle. A lot of folks are already replacing their existing equipment with electric. So I think in that category, I do feel like we have some pretty good opportunities there with that state legislation already in place.
So wouldn't that might be a place where we could achieve better percentages, since that's already, sort of coming down the pike, and there's a lot of people, if there's some sort of other incentives to, if people are running out of, their equipment is dying earlier than the cutoff date.
I think we want to be careful to remember that that's only the lawn equipment. It doesn't address some of those other categories of like construction vehicles and some of those kinds of things that are going to still be probably in play in 2030. So
there's a lot of blowers out there going.
That's one that I feel like it could potentially swing either way. I could see it, I'm also considering there's going to be a lot of construction in town, and there's going to be a lot more construction vehicles. So we may actually see increases in other ways and, decreases from some of the line items that go into that item and increases in others. So that's one that I think is a little harder to really predict.
Hey, Glenn.
Just on the tree issue. Yeah, Michelle's right, that 100 new trees is not going to do much for much carbon sequestration, but constructing a wetland might. Wetlands sequester a lot of carbon, and that might be something that could up our total, but we don't know what the Baylands plan is going to include yet. So I don't know if we can put that in there, but something to think about.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns that I think as we learn more about the plans there and have the EIR and figure out how that all contributes, a lot of these things will become more clear where there are opportunities and where we're still falling short.
Couple of thoughts. I'm going to call on myself. One is that I haven't said this before, and I'm just going to kind of say it now, is that I do not like this consultants tool as well as I liked DNVGL's. I feel like it's a little too high level to really do what we needed to do. Because I think Michelle has, I felt like with DNVGL, we had a little more latitude to kind of tease out things that were particular to Brisbane. Like we could, I think it'd be handy if the consultant looked at averted carbon, like how many emissions do we avert if we don't cut down trees? Because people are really interested in chopping down trees these days. And when they do that carbon is released. So I think that is something I'd love to have some information about. I'm not sure if this consultant is, I feel like DNVGL would have given these numbers to us. I'm not sure if this consultant is kind of willing to incorporate those sort of things into this tool. And I'm sure, and I also think they should add wetlands because I'm pretty sure because of the mitigation measures required by CEQA, they'll have to do some kind of wetlands restoration. I know they did in the previous EIR, and I don't think things have changed to where they wouldn't be required to do something this time around, but of course we don't know how much yet. And we would have to wait to see, but I think that should be in our plan at some point. Michelle?
So wait, can I respond to that before we go on to another comment? So first on the consultants, the previous more complete forecasting tool is still available to us, and the consultants are still happy to work with us to add additional categories or work on new measures. That's not really the exercise we were trying to do right now, because we know we're going to have to do that more detailed level analysis when we have that additional information from the Baylands, and when we would do that level of a deep dive when we actually do the climate action plan update, which we still intend to do once we have that information from the Baylands. So I don't want anybody to think that the consulting team has not been responsive or that they're not willing to do those things. They absolutely are. It's just that level of detailed investigation did not seem warranted to do now, and then again, hopefully not too much longer in the future when we actually can do that climate action plan update. The purpose of this effort is really in the climate emergency declaration. One of the lines commits to reporting on progress towards our reductions annually, and in fact, it's supposed to be happening in April. So this effort is really to be able to move forward with that and respond to that line in the climate emergency declaration while we await the Baylands and the climate action plan, so that we can continue to make progress. So I apologize if I didn't, provide that kind of upfront explanation of kind of why we're doing this at this high level at this point in time.
Okay, that's appreciated. I'll shelve my comments. Michelle?
Oh, thank you, Adrian. That really helps. The more tools, the better. I would like to know more, maybe Glenn, I don't know if you can send something to us more about what you mean by wetlands carbon sequestration. And is that just, saltwater wetlands, or does that include, daylighting some of our creeks, our frog habitats? I mean, I'd like to know what that encompasses, because we could use that. We do have a lot of water sources in Brisbane, and if this is an area where we can focus to increase carbon sequestration, we should be looking at that. So I'm really curious about this, especially since we're working on kind of frog habitat issues and other daylighting of creeks.
That's something we can certainly investigate. Mary?
With the potential new development of the quarry, we should be really heads up on what we can get out of that in order to reduce our carbon, in particular, maybe wetlands. I'm not sure, but just with that on the horizon, I think it'd be beneficial for us to really understand where what we can get out of it for purposes of this.
And also what we're willing to accept. I mean, 24/7 hour
Yeah.
operation of a truck moving.
Yes.
That's huge. That's hugely going to impact us.
Yes.
All right, I think Adrian, we've derailed you enough.
Well, I feel like I kind of missed my punchline here because there was a lot of discussion, but I guess I didn't quite get the reaction I expected out of this committee, that those percentages are laughable, extremely high, and in some cases unrealistic. I mean, I don't know. I didn't get to see everyone's face when I said we were going to electrify 40% of our residential buildings in the next 8 years, but that seems like a pretty darn high bar to me.
It's a very high bar, Adrian. That's 8 years. But you know what? If we don't, we won't be here in 20 years. So we have to go full force ahead the best we can.
Mm-hmm.
So this is really a reality check that I wish everyone in this town was looking at, and everyone in this state was looking at, because it's what we have to do to survive as a species, but we're not getting there fast enough. We're just not.
Well, I will tell you that I think a lot of folks in my position in other cities are also having similar conversations and similar realizations as I did the first time I looked at the Spark tool, and I went, yeah, we can do 66% by 2030. And then I just kept having to ratchet the numbers up and up and up and went, oh, geez, I don't know how we actually achieve that.
I found the peanut butter approach very inspiring, because doing 37% across the board, as unrealistic as that is, gets us a 66% reduction. That's like a BOGO sale. I felt awesome about that. So we just have to make sure that the areas that we fall short in, that we rise above by an equal amount, in other areas. And I for me, it felt good. It felt inspiring. It felt like almost made it feel more attainable, even though I know it's not actually what is going to happen. I realize that.
I wish I could say I felt the same. Unfortunately, I feel like I had a very different reaction. But the goal here was to look at what was a little bit more realistic, while also still being ambitious, and trying to figure out what we thought we could actually do. And so what we came up with in that respect, and I'll try to go through this a little bit quicker maybe this time. Again, we've got our electrification of newly constructed residential buildings. looking at electrifying 25% of all of our buildings might seem a little bit more realistic. This, I think, is the one where I feel like getting people out of their cars into other modes is very difficult. Getting people into public transit and active transit for 5% in each of those categories, I think seems much more realistic. I think when we actually got this spreadsheet from the consultants, they had like 3% in each of these. So to give you a sense of what they felt like was maybe a realistic number. 30% zero emission vehicle adoption in passenger vehicles and 15% in commercial. We have seen really strong upticks in purchases of electric vehicles, but this actually means all of the miles that are being driven by all of the cars on the road, not just how many new vehicles. So that's something important to keep in mind. And then I think we kept pretty much everything else the same, electrifying 50% of off-road equipment, 85% from landfilled organics, 25% from our landfill emissions, small amounts in water and wastewater, and carbon sequestration from trees.
I still don't agree with that. And I've said this before, but I don't think I said it when you sent this presentation out, that I think we should be hitting the landfill emissions much harder. Michelle?
So I did want to note, and I don't know, I think I had notes on the, oops, sorry. I had notes on this somewhere and I might have skipped over them. I am still working to figure out more exactly some of the details of those landfill emissions. And we saw in our 2017 inventory, no, sorry, our 2016 inventory, an interesting spike in the emissions in that line item that then went back down in 2016. And we weren't sure what that was about and didn't really have a good sense of what a business as usual would look like. Are they expecting to go up? Are they expecting to go down? What's happening there? So I've reached out to some folks at BDI and to the county and to the air district as part of this investigation. BDI had no explanation of why there would have been a spike. They said, if anything, they thought it should be going down. Things have been relatively stable. They flare methane less than 12 hours per week. And so it was very curious. And the air district's initial response so far has basically been, these numbers aren't matching what we are seeing, so we need to investigate if there was an error in the data that we passed along to the county. And they are looking into that and will get back to us. They expect that the level in 2014 that we saw should be consistent. And by what I discussed with BDI and the county, there is an expectation that emissions would go down over time according to kind of standard landfill decay models. So that's kind of where I've gotten thus far. I was hesitant to really put a much bigger number in there until we had a better sense of what really is happening there, what the expected reductions would be. And then a follow-up question that I've asked the air district is, are there known regulatory actions that are being taken on that sector that would have an impact? We're not the only landfill around, and the air district regulates emissions from those kinds of point sources. So that may be something that would be tackled at a more regional level for that sector. So those are all things that I'm investigating at this point in time. You may be right that we can do a lot better than 25% in that category. I just don't know enough yet.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns in all of these categories. So I guess I'm just less put off by the unknowns in landfill emissions than you are. Michelle?
So for a long time, I've thought that solving our climate issues was not going to be, there's no like silver bullet. There are a million solutions to this that we need to look at and work on and push forward on. And so I think that one of the things that we really need to do is like work locally, think globally. But I can't help but go back to this transit issue. Okay. And I think that we should think outside the box on solutions for this. And one of them would be like, including with BDI, having places. I know that sounds weird, but like having there was a company that before COVID started, that it was a company that was having workplaces for people who weren't going to offices, but they would go to a workplace to work remote for their businesses. And this is something that I think that Brisbane could do. Like we could have facilities where people come to work, their jobs, and we provide, a space, we provide facilities, we provide internet, that type of thing, that we have places where people can go to work remote without having to get in a car to go to their office, and that it's acceptable. We could even have, for companies that need time clocks and that kind of thing. I mean, there are so many creative ideas out there that we can work on. And I think that we need to really publish this list to the people of Brisbane and ask for ideas, because there are lots of ideas out there, and some of them are solutions to these problems that we have. And having workspace areas where people can come, like maker spaces, except you're not making maker spaces stuff. You're actually going to work, but at a place. I've worked at my dining room table for the last 2 years. I would have loved to have a place where I could go, bring my computer, and sit and work in a quiet environment that wasn't my own dining room table. Now I understand that COVID didn't allow that, but we're moving past that. So we need to think outside the box for every single one of these things, and not just about moving people from their personal cars into public transportation, but maybe think about moving people from commuting to working in place. And if working at home, maybe even more tax credits for working at home, maybe arrange carpool shopping groups, organize that kind of thing where people, okay, we're going to have a grocery shop. We're going to this store and this store on this time at this date, meet here. I mean, we need to start really thinking at grassroots levels outside of the box for every solution that we can do, because we're not going to get there otherwise. We're really not going to get there otherwise.
Glenn? Oops, sorry.
Michelle, have you finished?
I didn't mute her.
Michelle, you're muted. Were you
I
finished?
muted myself because I could go on my soapbox for a long time about individual actions that we can take and group actions that we can take in small groups that will really push us forward getting there. And we can't keep this to ourselves. We need to open it up and have everybody's ideas and sift through them and figure out which ones we can do to move us forward on these things. And this list is really eye-opening, really eye-opening. 8 years. We have 8 years to get there to this first part. That is scary and amazing at the same time.
All right, Glenn.
I was just going to say, I mentioned this in the CAP meeting, but I'll say it to the whole committee. Josh Becker, who is our senator, he's sitting in what used to be Jerry Hill's seat, has introduced a bill in the state legislature that is intended to take the whole Bay Area transit issue and knock some heads together and make a seamless transportation network. And also, one of the things I think is interesting about it is that he is proposing to investigate how Lyft and Uber and the other quote unquote rideshare services, which are really commercial, could work with public transit, which I think is really a visionary idea. right now, what's happened is a lot of people are using Lyft and Uber instead of public transit, and he wants to figure out a way that would allow them to work together. So that might really help cut down some of these vehicle trips. And I just wanted everybody to be aware of it. You know, you can go to his website and look at it and support it if you're inclined to.
Yeah, I think Becker's a great guy. I mean, I think we traded up there.
He definitely has some strong climate credentials. I think the bill number is 917, if I'm remembering correctly, the Seamless Bay Area. The name of it.
Yeah, I don't remember the bill number, but people
I could be wrong, but 917 sounds familiar to me for some reason. So I haven't seen much about it lately, but it was definitely sounded promising.
All right, Adrian, please continue.
So if we achieved those numbers on the last screen, where would that get us? And those numbers put us at a 55% reduction. So it's not quite the 66% that we had previously said, but it is above the state targets of that, you know, effectively 40% below 1990 levels is roughly 50% below our baseline. So we would be better than that. And really, I think in line with a lot of what you hear kind of at the more international level of we need to have emissions by the end of this decade. I don't want to make it sound like I'm suggesting we should not do everything we absolutely can and still try to go after that 66% number. But I do think that it is going to be extremely difficult to achieve. Even 55% reduction is going to be extremely difficult to achieve. And I want to not, how do I say this? I'd like us to set goals that are achievable to the extent possible. I think we should still continue to try to stretch and do everything we can. And if we can hit that 66%, I would be thrilled. I know that that's going to be a stretch. And that was the intention when we wrote the climate emergency declaration, was for it to be a stretch goal. So that's kind of where we came to with the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. Was this feels still ambitious, but maybe a little bit more realistic.
Yeah.
So, oh, go ahead, Barbara.
No, I mean, I kind of would like to see us have a plan to get to at least 50%, but you know. Yeah.
We do 55.
Okay, yeah. So you're right. I'm like, my brain is up. My brain was upside down for a moment. Never mind.
Okay, so what do we actually do? Because a lot of those things said electrify X% of this, or change this percent of emissions, but those aren't actually things that a city does directly. So looking at that building sector, electrifying our buildings might look a lot like actions we've already taken, REACH codes and other supporting programs for building electrification. In the REACH code area, we need to look at closing loopholes in those existing REACH codes for new buildings so that all new buildings are fully electric. And we need to start talking about expanding REACH codes to cover existing buildings so that we're not missing opportunities when people are making improvements to their homes or replacing appliances that are going to lock in emissions for a long period of time. I also think we ought to consider setting an end of gas flow date of 2040 to coincide with our carbon neutrality goal. This is something Half Moon Bay recently did. There's this 2045 because they are aligned with the state goal. But I really think that if we're being serious about being carbon neutral, there is no future for fossil fuels in that goal. And so stating that up front and being very clear about what that means, I think is an important market signal that is also something that can help with planning at the utility level and at the state level and help to shift investments that are being made into the gas system, into the electrical system. On building electrification supporting programs, we already have the Brisbane Building Efficiency Program, which is a great start. The beyond benchmarking requirements are going to, I think, be a good push for our larger commercial buildings to move towards efficiency and electrification. We can continue and increase our promotion of existing rebates and incentives, and there are a lot more that are coming. We could consider providing funding or financing for electrification directly. Some cities, mostly larger ones, have established revolving loan funds or partnered with credit unions and done other creative financing methods to help support electrification projects. Oops, sorry, I thought I had one more bullet there. Let's see, did I miss something? Nope, okay. So that's really on the building sector, what things might actually look like in terms of city actions and policy. Glenn?
So I don't know a whole lot about this, but I've read a couple of things. One of the things that slows down things like electrification or installing solar on rooftops and things like that is when a building is rented or leased. Very often the landlord has to pay for it, the tenant gets the benefit. And there might be some kind of ordinance type solution that we could look into that would address that question of split incentives. As I said, I was almost afraid to mention this because I don't know a whole lot more about it. It's kind of confusing territory, but it's a problem that's been identified many, many times in the literature. And I believe that there are some, model ordinances out there that might be applicable both to commercial and residential. I suspect that a lot of the housing in Brisbane is resident owned. But we already know that a lot of the commercial buildings are not inhabited by their owners, they're inhabited by tenants. And so that might be slowing down various kinds of changes. So that's maybe something that we should look into.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit about that in the creation of the building efficiency program. One thing that we did for those commercial buildings was put in a measure that they could adopt when they get to that beyond benchmarking phase to adopt something called a green lease, which specifically, there are models out there available for property owners to utilize to essentially address that split incentive. So it may look like higher rent payments, but that owner putting investment into their building that results in the tenant having lower utility bills and a lower overall cost. So that is kind of baked in there. And I think as we get into that beyond benchmarking, it's going to be something that we're going to want to promote very heavily. On the residential side, I'm less familiar with some of the strategies. I know I've heard some folks talking about tariffed on-bill financing, which I am not going to be able to accurately explain. So I'm not going to probably try, but my understanding is that it is a type of financing that goes on your utility bill that is tied to your rate, and perhaps it's more accessible to renters in some way. And I'm not sure I understand fully that mechanism or how it works, but I have heard that being mentioned as a solution in this area before. So those are some kind of things that are being talked about. I think a lot of those kinds of actions are probably more at a utility kind of level or a regional kind of level, but then certainly there would be local ordinances that we may be able to do for other things.
Something to look into further.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the vehicle side of things, shifting to active transportation, public transportation, and zero emission vehicles might include installing charging stations in public locations to support EVs. That is something that we are working on. Expanding EV charging requirements to existing buildings. So that's something that has started to come up in the reach code circles very preliminarily. We already do require a high level of EV charging for new buildings, but at some point in time, we're going to have to figure out how we get that accessibility to some of our existing buildings, especially multifamily. E-bike or e-scooter share programs. E-bikes are getting pretty big and might help with some of the hilliness of Brisbane, making some of those active commutes a little bit more possible for more people. Expanding our bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, continuing to promote public and active transit, educating and promoting zero emission vehicles through things like EV ride and drive events. I think we talked about possibly trying to see if we could incorporate something like that with Day in the Park back in 2020, and then that didn't happen, but maybe now that we're back to doing more things in person, it could move forward. PCE has a lot of EV and e-bike incentives that we definitely should make sure people are hearing about. And then I think this might be the last one. Nope, maybe not. Advocating for more and better public transit options with our county and regional agencies, and addressing our own municipal fleet. And I do see here in my notes, Glenn, the bill we were discussing earlier is SB 917, Seamless Bay Area Transit Bill.
Oh, okay.
So I did have that in my notes. And I know one of the other things that we talked about with the CAP subcommittee on public transportation was, the Caltrain stop being closer to downtown, and just a lot of uncertainty about how the Baylands transit-oriented development is integrated into the forecasting. And probably at this point, it really isn't. And so as we have more data on that, I think we will really have more of an insight into what we can do there. Michelle, thank you first.
I would like us to add to the list supporting facilities like WeWork, and also supporting tax credits for businesses that allow work from home and support work from home. I think those are very important things to reduce single car commuting. And I think the other thing on this list should be supporting, kind of group excursion shopping things, that type of thing. But I don't think it's all about converting people from private to public transit. I think it has a lot to do with changing habits of how people interact. So I'd like those things to be added to our list of things that we should be working on to achieve this goal. Thank you.
Noted. Glenn?
I'll defer to Erin. I think she had her hand up before I did, and she hasn't said much. So go ahead, Erin. You're muted. You're muted.
I pushed the wrong button. I'm sorry. Glenn, you actually did have your hand up before me, but I'll take the floor. You said something during our subcommittee meeting about how, the current increase in gas prices are really helping. I hope I'm not stealing your thunder. But one thing I realized when I was driving home from Moffett Field this week is that those stinking express lanes are not going to help with EV adoption, because they just made it so that there's no carpool lane for an EV. They pay half the HUV price. So it takes away an incentive for commuters to buy an electric vehicle, right? So I think one of the things where we're advocating for more better public transit options should be to advocate for a further reduction in the percent an EV would pay to get in that lane, into the express lane, in order to encourage people to decide that it's, worth the added at this time expense to buy a zero emission vehicle.
Yeah,
That's
I think
all
that's a state level. That's probably a Caltrans policy. I'm not sure. I don't think there's probably much we can do at the city level except advocate.
Yeah, that advocate is all I was suggesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what the dynamics of that would be, but I think there is probably likely to be some concern about equity in a solution like that at this point in time, even with rebates and incentives and high gas prices, EVs are out of reach for a lot of lower income folks. So
are those express lanes though? I mean, that's a double equity issue, both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Peninsula Clean Energy's rebates on used EVs, I mean, I think that belief that EVs are out of reach of lower income people is becoming increasingly antiquated. I mean, it's not gone, but it's changing.
Right, but for those express lanes, only the new EVs are eligible.
Oh yeah,
In some ways, like encouraging folks who can't afford it to buy those creates a better zero emission vehicle car market.
Mm-hmm. Glenn?
I was going to suggest something specific about more and better public transit options. I don't know if we can do this or not, but South City has a free shuttle that goes up Grand Avenue. I think it starts on Linden, somewhere close to downtown South City, goes up Grand Avenue, ends up at BART. I'm just wondering if we've ever talked to South City. I mean, I wonder if we could maybe pay to get them to extend that shuttle service up to our stop on Bayshore, maybe work it out with them, because, and the value of that would be, it would increase the availability of the shops on Grand Avenue to people in Brisbane. It's possible that some of our own businesses wouldn't like that because it would give people more lunch options, but it would increase access to Grand Avenue. And very importantly, it would give people much more direct access to BART than they have now. And I think, and that's the main reason that I'm suggesting it. So I wonder, I don't know how it is to negotiate with other cities about transit, but that shuttle already exists. It already runs. It is free, which would be appealing. And I believe it runs all day. So I'm just wondering if that's something we might look into.
yeah, do you happen to know if that's a city shuttle or is that a commute.org shuttle?
I believe it is a city shuttle.
I mean, these are all things we can look into. Which of them are going to, work out is another question. But
sure.
Of
course.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a city thing.
Yeah. Aaron?
Shauna was definitely next.
The person who raised hands first goes to the top left corner in my screen. So,
Aaron?
Interesting. I totally thought it was Shauna. Maybe because my last name starts with B, I just go to the top of the list. So Adrian's point that she just said is kind of important. There's a lot of really good ideas, and we're smart, dedicated people, but this community is filled with tons of people. So I think coming up with a plan of how to solicit and kind of vet really good ideas might not be a bad idea.
Definitely.
And second, Glenn's really good idea about the, tying Brisbane into that Grand Avenue shuttle. If we can't get them to come here, maybe we could take our shuttle and have that be an added stop as their closest shuttle stop.
Yeah, something.
Shauna?
Actually, mine kind of ties into that too, is like, why don't we have a way to tie into the T line that stops up on Bayshore and at Geneva, basically. That was kind of one of my stopping points. It's frustrating to live in Brisbane if you don't have a car. I mean, you have to have a car if you live here, unless you're working home. I have to commute into the city because that's where my clients are, and I actually do on-site things. But if I was working downtown somewhere, I'd be mad as hell that the T line stopped up there, and there's plenty of room down the center of Bayshore to keep that light rail, to bring a light rail into Brisbane, for crying out loud.
Yeah, no, I take the 292 in every day. But San Francisco's notorious for not wanting to serve beyond its borders, which is why the T line stops where it does. And then I had something other thought along that lines. Well, let's all support Senator Becker's bill, okay? And we have a Brisbane shuttle, but it's sort of advertised as being limited to seniors. It's empty most of the time. If we kind of push that out a little bit, then and we actually do have the commute.org shuttle too. And
that's only during commute hours, though.
But it's only during commute hours, yeah. So I think we just need to, I don't know, how do we get people to take it? Because it's out there. There is stuff, there are options.
Unfortunately, I think with all things public transit, there's a chicken or egg problem. People don't take it because it doesn't come frequently enough to be there when they need it or at convenient times. And because nobody rides it, then they can't expand service. So it's a conundrum that vexes, I think, all public transit. And then I did just want to note, we talked about the Becker Seamless Bay Area bill. Part of that bill, I don't know if we specifically said, is really about making sure that there are easy connections and timed transfers between systems, and that you don't have to necessarily buy 2 different tickets. So it saves people money on transferring from one system to another. So that's all kind of rolled up in that bill. Mary, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I saw Mary there for a minute.
Yeah, I did. I just had started going back to the office, and I said, okay, I'm going to take the Caltrain. So right in the month of April, Caltrain is offering 50% off, which is very reasonable. And I going to still take Caltrain because I'm off the road and there's crazy drivers out there. But just having incentives for folks to take public transportation, I think, is important, because the half off is less than a tank of gas, or not a tank of gas, a gallon of gas. So just being able to provide more reasonable public transportation cost, I think, is important to get people to use it, and more frequency is important too, and meeting shuttles. The time for shuttles to meet you at your public transportation area is important too, because they don't come that often, or they're not consistent. The drivers don't show up to work, and you get a text saying, sorry, your shuttle's not going to be there, and then you have to figure out, then you're taking an Uber from Caltrain home or walking. Anyway, just more affordable public transportation, I think, would help the cause.
Are commuter checks still a thing?
Some companies offer that. Mine does not. But you can use, they have a flexible spending account for transportation where it's pre-tax dollars. So you can use that. It's something.
I think cutting fares and offering incentives like you suggested is better. Commuter checks are kind of not very visible to people.
Yeah. And it's a burden on the business to manage that. So I think it's got to come from
the agencies.
Yes, I do. Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
All right, and we'll move on. So in this category, we have the electrifying off-road equipment, the SB 1383, landfill emissions, and planting trees. So we already talked about the fact that there is legislation regarding banning the sale of lawn equipment. We could consider a trade-in program for two-stroke gas equipment to advance in advance of that, to try to speed up the conversion of folks who still have them. Of course, we are going to be implementing SB 1383 and our disposable foodware ordinance. improving our waste diversion to 85% by 2030 and 95% by 2040. We're at, I believe, 76% currently. So these feel like fairly achievable numbers, especially with some of the new state and regional legislation. Create an urban forestry plan and establish a goal to grow Brisbane's tree canopy. I will say it's not on the slide, but I think any urban forestry plan would certainly incorporate looking at maintaining what we currently have in addition to expanding. Provide resources to improve tree health, maintenance, and watering to deter removal of large canopy trees. Oops, sorry, thought I had more on there. And then we did talk a little bit already about the landfill emissions, and I did not have a line item up here because, as I said, that's still very much an active investigation, but there may be opportunities to capture instead of flare methane or other actions, regulatory at the air district or something along those lines. So TBD once that investigation proceeds.
Just a clerical, just a minor note, increase carbon sequestration by planting XX trees. Would it be 3 X's since we're looking at 100?
I didn't edit the text that came from the consultants on those. So yes, sure.
Hey, oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand, but I was going to say, can we add, wetlands issues here?
Yeah, I would. I think it's going to probably be a bigger discussion with the consultants about how we can model what that would look like. I don't know that they have anything in their existing forecasting tools that really do that. Frankly, having anything about sequestration at all in the tools is relatively new. And I think that is definitely going to be an area where there's already a lot of growing talk about sequestration, both from natural solutions like forests and wetlands, and also just straight up sucking CO2 out of the air and storing it in rocks or underground caverns or whatever the case may be. So I think there will be probably a growing area for emissions inventories in the future.
Okay, Glenn?
Sorry to go back to buildings, but this question just popped into my head. Adrian, do you know when they made the business as usual forecast, do you know if they figured in an increase in energy use from air conditioning? Because every study I've seen has predicted that.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head, I don't know that for certain, but I do know when they create those business as usual scenarios, they are looking at a lot of future forecasting research. So I would imagine that because that is very much out there in the literature that is done on how energy usage is going to change, how temperatures are going to change, I would think it's reasonably likely that it is, but I don't know for certain. And that's certainly something we can talk about.
So one thing I was going to suggest, I mean, it is going to be, as you've said, as we've said, really hard to get buildings to electrify completely. But we might be able to get people to put on cool roofs and avoid future energy use, whether it's electric or fossil fuel, that way.
Sorry about that. Shauna?
Thanks. I guess this goes back to about the sequestration and the potential for adding in a line item about wetlands, or, I know it's kind of a thing, but couldn't we have a line item now with the might look like, putting a note in there about developing wetland potential, since we have so much?
This is kind of a spaghetti on the wall moment. So we can put it all out there and see what sticks and see what we're able to forecast and what we can start to move forward with.
I think that's great. Shauna?
Yes, that was my question.
Oh, sorry. Erin?
I'm going to go back to Glenn's point about the canopy trees leading to less air conditioning use, which I think is fantastic. And then I'm going to say my frustration with this spreadsheet is that we don't, as individuals, we don't get credit for stuff like putting solar on our own homes, because we've already gotten that credit with Peninsula Clean Energy. And that makes me wonder if we would get any credit for, building efficiency that's not just solely electrification, because it's already kind of swept up in the Peninsula Clean Energy credit. Is there a credit for reduction of energy use, even if that energy use is electric?
Yes. So in a couple of ways. First off, while an individual displacing their home electricity with solar may not have a direct reduction in terms of our emissions, because PCE is already much cleaner energy, it is a very important enabler to electrification. Having solar panels on your home makes having an all-electric home a much more cost-effective thing to do. So I think it's important for people to know that having solar on their homes is still a good thing to consider. I don't want to make it sound like we shouldn't still promote that, because we should. And it can really be helpful in making the economics of electrification work out for individual homeowners and residents. As far as energy efficiency, there's two pieces of that. If we're talking about natural gas usage, obviously energy efficiency is going to mean less gas usage, which is a direct emissions reduction. If we're talking about efficiency from electricity, it is still important for a couple of different reasons. One is that there is still a small amount of emissions attributed to grid energy usage, because we still have dirty energy on the grid. And so that is getting cleaner all the time, but it's still in there. It's much smaller than it used to be, but it's still there. So it does matter. It's also important to think about, this is all money that people are spending. So as energy bills go up, people saving energy and having lower bills is important financially from an individual perspective. It's also important from a grid perspective, because growing our electrical capacity is something that takes a lot of time and resources and is expensive to do. Now, I don't want to make it sound like there's not existing electrical capacity for electrification, because there is. The grid is sized to our peak electrical usage, which is air conditioning, full blast on a hot summer day. And a lot of the electrification that we would be talking about is not at those peak times. There have been studies done that look at that overall energy load across the entire grid. And at the times we would really be adding electrical usage, that's still going to be lower than what our peak is. But when we use electricity is important. Where we can shift that electricity to be used at different peak times, different times than the peak, that is helping to reduce our emissions, because we don't have to go rely on more dirty energy sources to meet those peak loads. So all of those things factor into what our overall emissions from buildings look like. So using electricity, being more efficient with it, and using it at the times of day when solar energy is most prevalent are all helpful ways overall for everyone to reduce our energy usage and reduce emissions.
Mary?
So that brings up a good point because I remember in the early days, we had a couple of Baylands committee meetings, and we did talk about the problem of not being able to store all that solar power. So, I mean, that's a big area that needs to be addressed as well. And right, so because right now, I mean, you shouldn't use any major appliances between 4 and 9 p.m., right? Because of the lack of solar power, because we don't have the ability to store it. So that, I don't know if that's something we could put on here, but being able to store the excess in order to be able to tap into that when we are in peak periods. Does that make sense? Am I making sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, there is a very large and growing focus on energy storage on the grid. And for those day-to-day peak loads, batteries are very effective in that short-term energy shift from a daytime solar production into those evening hours. What is termed the short duration energy storage. What we also really need more, statewide, society-wide is that longer term, that seasonal energy storage. And that is still a much trickier prospect, but it's still, wherever we can be energy efficient, wherever we can utilize the solar that we have when we have it. It used to be that if you had an EV, you should charge overnight. And now actually, if you have an EV, probably the lowest emissions time of day to charge would be that middle of the day. If you are home and can charge your EV while there is abundant solar on the grid, that is going to be the best time to do it. And so those are the kind of things that, we've kind of have to shift our mindset into using that energy during those times. And some of the newer technologies are also very helpful with that. Things like heat pump water heaters. Many of the newer models have demand response functions. So you basically preheat your water to a higher level during those times of day when we have abundant clean energy on the grid. And then during that peak period from 4 to 9 p.m., your water heater isn't heating up. It's at higher temperature than it would otherwise be. And there's a mixing valve that mixes that hotter water with the colder water to get you that temperature water that you want without having to heat up water during those peak periods. So we're able to shift energy in those ways with some of these newer technologies. And those are really important strategies to helping to address that energy imbalance that we have. And you guys are getting all kinds of really interesting, wonky stuff tonight. All right, we are getting pretty late and we still have some other agenda items though. So I want to go ahead and I think this might be the last or close to the last slide, talking about municipal measures. As I mentioned, reducing water and wastewater emissions are very tiny percentages, so not particularly high priority, but they are something that is kind of more in the emissions from the municipal operations sector side of things. As a city, as an organization, there are a lot of things that we can do to lead by example, and we need to be attacking everywhere we can. So leveraging city purchasing and contracts, working in sustainable preferences wherever we can, that might be incrementally in some of our existing contracts, undergoing a full zero net energy study for all our city facilities. So really kind of identifying and prioritizing projects by when that, gas equipment might burn out. So we make sure we don't miss any opportunities. Converting our vehicle fleet to zero emissions. Incentivizing city employees to shift our commutes, work from home, public transit, walking, all of those things. A lot of people probably don't realize that city employees and how we get to and from our jobs is actually part of our municipal operations emissions inventory. Some cities are using green bonds and other creative newer financing to make some of these infrastructure investments or public building investments. Oops. And I think that was it. I have a few more notes in here about some of the details of what some of those things might look like as far as employee incentives or whatnot, but not sure how much people want to continue to discuss those kinds of things.
I think I personally would like to move on.
Okay. So even this more realistic level still really requires bigger and faster change than we've seen before. And it's going to require significant resources and money. And so that's really kind of the conversation is going to need to get into what are the things that we need to prioritize first and get started to get underway, and how can we make sure that we are building towards some of these bigger actions and higher cost measures over time. And with that, I think we've had a lot of discussion throughout, so I'm not sure if there's anything folks feel like they want to add at this juncture. I think my thought was at this point, we would be talking about additional suggestions or what folks wanted to add, but I think we've already gone into a lot of that. So I'll just, if anybody has any other thoughts you want to share.
Just my closing words. I think when you talk to council, if you could de-emphasize like how, because you said many times it's going to be really, really hard. And like, I just think we could just say it was hard. Kind of just not emphasize the extremity of the difficulties we're facing. I think that would be helpful.
I hear your point. I guess my perspective is I don't want to undersell the level of effort or expense that is going to take. I think it's really important that they understand that we all understand that, so that they are prepared when those future ordinances or budget requests come up to make those decisions. So that's kind of why I'm trying to put that emphasis on it now, when we're not coming to them necessarily with a here's our budget ask, but to make sure that they know that those kinds of things are going to have to come.
Okay. All right. Point taken, Erin.
So I actually had a different point, but I'm just going to weigh in on there is the longer we wait, the harder it's going to get. And so maybe that should be the message is we need to start now. The point I was going to make is one thing that appeared kind of early in the presentation, but not later, is the potential for education, right? I think a lot of people just don't know that this is coming. And so outreach, I think, is a huge thing the city can do to help. And that's it. Thank you.
Glenn?
I was just going to say, I think we have a pretty grown-up council. So I don't feel it's necessary to soft pedal this. In fact, I don't think that we should. I agree with Erin's point about education, although I sometimes feel like banging my head against the wall. I think most of the people in Brisbane who are interested in knowing these things already have some idea about them. The question is how to reach everybody else. And I'm not real sure how we do that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm sorry, I don't think it's a question of how grown up our council is. So I don't sell them short in that way. I just think, it's not important. Michelle?
I do think we have to put the pedal to the metal, and it's not going to, education is important, but I don't think they want to hear it.
Yeah.
So we just need to push forward anyway.
Yeah.
And our council knows this, but I don't think they want to hear it either. No one wants to hear this because it's really doom and gloom. But if we don't, it's going to be fatal. So we just need to push ahead.
Agreed.
I don't even want to hear it. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
No, I've had discussions with fellow climate folks over the years about the doom and gloom aspect of it, and a point that I made recently that I don't know if I've necessarily shared with this group is, I think one of the things that we need to do more is talk about the opportunities for a better life and a better community that these changes will bring. Change is hard, and I don't want to undersell that, but if we actually achieve all of these things, the future will be better. And it hasn't always been sold that way. People think of environmental actions, or, it's kind of historically been like a sacrifice, and it shouldn't be. It really, like, I had somebody ask me recently about driving an EV that had a kind of antiquated perspective that, like, oh, well, but you're just doing that because it's like the environmental thing to do. No, it's not. It is a better car. It is more fun to drive. And I never even liked driving, but it is better. And people need to hear those kinds of things so that they realize this is not a sacrifice. This is actually just better technology. It's the future. We're not still using rotary phones either. So we can do better.
Yeah. All right. Are we ready to move on? All right. Old business.
All right. I'm going to actually stop share and switch to a different share. So, as requested, we are bringing back the work plan, just structured as the OSEC work plan. I think besides for the change in the title and the removal of the staff items, the only real change was, where is it, on the invasive species, where we just shortened that to remove the just specific to the acres portion so that it's more open-ended study and draft invasive species ordinance. And I think the only other thing was that some of the climate action stuff was just in the staff side, which it shouldn't have been. So we've added that back in to the OSEC side of things. So that was clear that it is something that OSEC will act on once we have that EIR, and then we also have it up here as far as the climate emergency goals. Any questions? Michelle?
Yeah, this looks great. Adrian, thank you so much for listening to us and realizing that your contributions are amazing. But this is kind of like what we're expected to do is the open space plan. But one of the parts that I'm missing here, when we did this, were we already working on the frog habitat issues with because am I not saying it here? Maybe I'm just really tired.
Had that not come up before? Is it in?
I think it did, or, like we're kind of starting to work on it. We've been working on it for a while. I don't know if it was in the last plan or not. I don't have it in front of me, and I'm sorry. It's late and I'm tired. But if it needs to be
kicked out again.
Oh,
yeah, and I just tried to promote her. Oh, no, she's back.
I'm back. I don't know what's going on tonight.
Sunspot activity. So I want to make sure that that's on our work plan, but and I thought it was, but maybe not. I don't know.
I'm not seeing it. and I know that I didn't remove it. Would you
Okay.
like to make a recommendation for specific language, or would you like us to
You
just
know,
incorporate that?
I think it was, I think we did talk about it being included with the habitat restoration, right? I mean, we could drop it in there.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Oh,
I mean,
no,
I thought we had a discussion about that, but maybe I'm wrong.
This otherwise looks really good.
Wait, we had a motion that we were gonna do something with off-road equipment or lawn
Not for-
equipment, I think
no.
so, long time ago.
Number 5, support the conversion of small off-road engines.
Oh, good, it is in there, okay.
Yeah. The only thing of it that's missing is the frog thing, and I don't know whether I can't remember what the timing was to put it in our work plan, but it is currently on our work plan. So
Yeah, it had better be in here.
Yeah, I think it would, since we are already reopening this anyway, adding under the frog, under the habitat restoration section.
perfect place for it. Perfect place for it. Yeah. And as to language, I'll leave that up to you, Adrian, at this point. Or you and Karen. Karen's familiar with the work we're doing on it. But this looks great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. And this does not in any way mitigate the amazing contributions that you make to the city of Brisbane, Adrian, in your work as sustainability manager. I was almost embarrassed that we were, quote unquote, taking credit for the work that you do, because we shouldn't be. We should work in concert with you and support you in that. But there are many, many things that you do as sustainability manager that is independent work that's just amazing. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. There's obviously a lot of overlap, and there's we thought it was helpful to see them both together, but that's not how other committees do it. So we'll be consistent with them. We'll have the OSEC work plan, and we will just make sure that we are sharing the staff items with others as appropriate as well.
Thank you.
So I think with that, then the next item, I've got to switch my share again to go back to the slides, is the proposed budget. So we had been here with Carolina and Stu last month and talked about the existing budget, but as we are in budget season, we wanted to talk a little bit about the proposed budget. You can see that we are, the line items that are in blue are new ones that we are adding in requests for next year. Of course, these will all be in competition with all of the other demands of city resources, but we're putting those asks in. And I think we maybe just lost Barbara again. I just saw the number of participants drop. So I don't necessarily want to read to you what's on the screen. So I will just ask if anybody wants me to discuss anything in particular or has any questions.
You can see there, there's
when does it get approved? Oops, sorry. When does it get
just
submitted? Oh,
let me say that the frog habitat biologist plan is there, so we do need to add it to the work plan. Go ahead, Mary. I'm sorry.
oh, I was just wondering when the submission of these budget line items are due, and when do we find out if they get approved?
I am going to have to see if Karen or Randy is able to answer that question. Generally, the budget is hopefully adopted before the start of the new fiscal year, but I don't know if there are exact dates in mind at this point.
I could take a first pass at that.
Okay.
So typically what we try to do is schedule a meeting with the city manager here in May And there will be at least one, most likely 2 meetings with the city council in June. And then the budget is approved so that it's effective July 1.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
I think it would help too if we, took some of these off as things that contribute to the climate action plan, like the urban forestry plan, the frog habitat, Climate Corps fellows, different things like that. This looks really good, Adrian.
All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Definitely a lot of that effort goes to Karen as well.
And Karen, I figured she was asleep by now with a margarita in her hand.
I'm here, but I'm tired. Thank you.
It has been a long one for it to be 2 hours later. So I think if there aren't any other questions, we'll keep you updated as this moves forward and we'll let you know how it goes. That we are ready for staff updates.
I didn't write any. I have a couple on subcommittees, but nothing on staff updates.
All righty, I will try to go through these very quickly. The divestment resolution passed unanimously at City Council last week on the 21st. Thanks to Glenn, who came and spoke to Council about the item. We had unanimous support. We submitted it to the bill author and the legislative staff and the Appropriations Committee, which is the committee that's going to be hearing it next yesterday, with that signed resolution and all. So that is done, and we will look forward to updates from Glenn as it continues through the legislative process. Yeah, Glenn, did you?
I was just going to say the Appropriations Committee is going to meet on May 2nd, which I think is Monday of next week.
Yep.
So it's coming out pretty soon.
Oh, it is. Good. Well, we got that in just in time then. There are going to be SB 1383 letters going out to residential addresses, all of the residences in town, in batches. The first batch went out was assembled today. So hopefully in mailboxes over the next few days, and we'll do the remainders in 2 weeks and 4 weeks. So that we could kind of split up those batches to mail all roughly 1,400, I think, mailing addresses that we had. The building efficiency program, we've had 7 properties already submit their 2021 reports as of yesterday morning when I checked. We've got a reminder that went out via email earlier this week. We've got a star ad about the deadline that's coming up on May 15th. So we ended up with pretty good results from last year. Hopefully we'll continue to improve upon that this year, but it's been pretty quiet so far. Just a couple of people reaching out, asking for support. We have a sustainability internship position posted for the summer. We had 16 applicants. I sent an interview request to the top 5 candidates today, so we'll be interviewing them next week and hopefully have somebody joining us for about 12 weeks over the summer to help support all of these activities that we're working on. I think this is the last one besides for some subcommittee notes. Received notification today of a CalRecycle SB 1383 grant award, about $20,000 that we have planned to put into participation in 2 countywide collaborations. One of them is with the Resource Conservation District to do compost application on local agricultural lands that helps meet our procurement requirements under the law. And then the other is with the Office of Sustainability leading a marketing effort to improve composting. So, basically just getting messages out there about what goes where so that we have better, cleaner compost. And I think that does it. Erin?
So the compost that got dumped for Earth Day, that was gone super fast. So would it help with our usage of that if we did it in spring and fall and not just once a year?
We certainly could look at doing additional giveaways. We have Scavenger, sorry, getting late here. Scavenger is committed to doing 2, and we opted to do 2 kind of back-to-back this spring, one that was specifically for the community garden, and then the other continuing our annual giveaway to the public. We are going to have to figure out how we're going to meet our procurement requirements, and giving compost away to the public is one of the ways that we can do that, but that would come at the city's expense, not Scavenger's expense in the future. So I think we're still going to be figuring out exactly what we're doing and how we're meeting those requirements and what the costs are of various different methods to continue to do that. I saw a virtual hand from Jason briefly and a physical one from Glenn. And Randy.
I'll go. Just a quick comment on the compost giveaway. I got there at about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I had passed it earlier, and there was a van there that was just really loading up. I think some people are taking a lot more than their share, and that's why it disappeared so very fast. So we may need to get a volunteer out there to kind of supervise things. I hate to say that, but I think that's part of what happened, Erin.
I guess I shouldn't be too surprised to hear that, but a little disappointed.
Yeah.
I guess it was under the wraps enough in past years that we didn't really have too many problems with that, but maybe word has gotten out.
No, it was at least half gone, probably more like 2/3 gone by 11 o'clock in the morning.
Wow. Okay. Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer one more staff update. We down at the marina are finding that we're having to replace a lot of the streetlights out there because they're just failing over the years and being exposed to the salt air. But after a lot of research by the harbor master, we were able to find 2 different manufacturers and produce photovoltaic powered LED lights that also power down in the wee hours of the night. So we've ordered 10 of those. They're a couple, 3 months before they get in here, but we're really excited about that. And certainly once we get them up and running, I think we ought to have a party out there at night and see how they look and see how they work. That's it.
That's awesome, Randy.
Cool.
Great. All right. I think we can. Oh, I guess I was going to talk. We briefly talked about this in our announcements earlier, but I guess I was going to throw this in during staff updates as well. I forgot I had this in there. We had about 20 people, I think it was, for the Habitat Day.
We had more than 20. I think we had more like 30, don't you? I could almost name that many.
Something in that vicinity, maybe 25 or so. We had 22 registered plus 3 of us staffing it. And I thought we had something close to that that showed up in person. So made some really good progress on removing mostly broom, some fennel, and protecting purple needle grass.
We had 3 committee members that showed up. We had 2 San Bruno Mountain Watch Board members and 1 planning commissioner and 1 past planning commissioner that showed up. So we had a really good turnout. And I just really wanted to thank everybody that showed up, especially our city staff, Adrian and Jeff, who worked very hard. And it was really, and I love the new t-shirts we got. Thank you.
Yes, much thanks to Bob, who got those t-shirts done early before he kind of transitioned. And I don't know if I had mentioned to you, Michelle, he told me that he was planning on coming, and then he hurt his wrist like a week before and wasn't able to come pull weeds. Otherwise he would have joined us as well, I think.
Yeah, he sent me a personal email, and I told him, no, take care of it, because then you can't help us next time if you don't get well this time. So yeah.
I will note that at the end, Jeff and Ariel and I talked a little bit about when we might be looking at a summer Habitat Day, and it sounds like all 3 of us, or at least two out of three of us have some travel planned for June. So probably we will be looking at mid-July. I forget what that Saturday is. That's kind of right, 15th, 16th, 17th, something around in there, I want to say, was kind of our likely target date. So we will be back in touch about that.
Okay.
Michelle, you already had some ideas about a location.
Yeah.
Randy, was your hand up from before, or did you have something else you wanted to add?
Sorry, that was operator error. That was from before.
Okay. All right. Subcommittee report. Climate action plan. Well, we did some work. We talked about it already.
Yeah, pretty much. Nothing we can really add to what we've hashed through already. It was basically the whole meeting. It's about, yeah. Anyway, if nobody minds or has any specific questions about the climate action plan subcommittee, we could move on to events.
We just talked about events with the Habitat Day. We just did a potential in July. We'll do the coastal cleanup in September, Day in the Park in early October. We need help with Day in the Park. And that's about where we're at.
Okay.
You want to talk about any reorganization? I think this was one subcommittee we talked about potential reorganization.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I am on 6 committees. I should not be on 6 committees. So we do need to talk about reorganization.
So before we get too far down this road, I do remember that we were going to originally last year, I think late last year, we discussed and decided that we would have a subcommittee, an ad hoc subcommittee to look at the, what is that state one that's doing the lawn equipment, and sort of, I think we should expand that and look at off-road, figure out all what off-road thing is and kind of dig down into kind of, because I think it's going to take more than just the CAP can do to kind of dig down into that off-road equipment area. Or we could just do an ad hoc subcommittee for just looking at the state's new electrification of lawn equipment. So what I'm saying is I think we need to add one to this. And I think we should before we start reorganizing things.
But it's not on the work plan, so can we just randomly add ad hocs?
I mean, it is on the work plan. Adrian just said it's on the work plan, so. And he says we're going to support it, and I think we talked last year about figuring out what we're going to do to support it. I mean, we just don't know yet.
Jason?
Are we talking about the off-road stuff or the frogs?
Off-road.
Off-road.
Yeah.
I mean, it's on our work plan. I guess I had kind of thought that maybe that would be something the CAP subcommittee would work on.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But
I kind of thought it needed to be its own animal because I think it's going to take, I think CAP is pretty much taken up with the CAP. But if everybody else is of the opinion that CAP should do it, I suppose I could live with that. Glenn?
Yeah, I think we've got enough committees. I think, some of the committees are not really producing a whole lot right now. I'm not sure what's being served by adding another committee, and CAP is not all that busy until the Baylands EIR.
Okay.
So I think we can handle that.
All right, cool. As long as that's the way that, does anybody else have any opinions?
Enough committees, my opinion, I agree.
Okay, all right.
I would just add that I think it would be in line with sort of how the building efficiency program, was kind of fostered under the CAP subcommittee for a while, and until we got to more of the consultant and implementation phase. So I think we could do similar kind of thing with this.
Okay. All right, I'll let that go to bed. Nobody had anything additional to add to events, so education and outreach?
I'd like to be off this one. There's other couple I'm happily go on, but I don't, it's not a good fit for me, education and outreach.
Okay, sure. Are you?
I'll join, happy to join the frogs, the trees, frogs, invasive species, happy to join any of them.
Okay.
Maybe Jason could take my place on invasive species.
Done. I will invade.
Because I need to give up some of these. I have 6.
Yes, yes.
I have the most, and I
Give
can't
up.
do 6.
Get off the cross. We need the wood.
Thanks, Jason. I'm good with that change. I can still, whisper in your ear, get rid of the ivy.
Yes.
Is there anyone else who's interested in joining the education and outreach subcommittee?
No, well, it can survive with just 2 for a while. That's
Yeah.
okay.
While we're on the subject of education and outreach, the library display, are we due for the next quarter's change up, right?
I don't
Well, we
think
only
so.
put the last one up a month ago, but
No.
we should
Okay, okay.
discuss it before it's
Okay.
due.
Okay, we could do it next meeting, that's fine.
That's a subcommittee though.
Yes.
Bayland subcommittee?
Well, we still haven't had any meetings that keep getting canceled.
Yahoo!
It's not Brisbane, I think it's BDI. So,
Okay. It'll be interesting to see when they finally crack that nut, what comes out.
You want to stay on that, Michelle?
I'm not on that. That's
I am.
Mary.
Oh, okay.
it's,
Cool.
I don't know if I can get off of it. It's kind of
Yeah, that one
council
was
appointed, but I can tell you once it does start, I think it's gonna warrant another person or 2, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
my understanding is that there is one representative from OSEC, one representative from other committees and commissions. So I would expect that unless the formulation of that changes.
Yeah,
would
I mean, we
one
won't know what will happen, so.
Usually we have a designated alternate though. Just in case, it finally does start happening, and it will, of course, there's a high probability, according to Murphy, that it'll be on a day that she can't make it. So we could designate an alternate. I'd love to do it, but if somebody else wants it, if somebody else is passionate about it, I don't have to be the alternate.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay. Awesome. Workspace plan update. Or sorry, open space plan update.
I want to stay on that.
Okay. Do you guys have an
Yeah,
update?
likewise. Yeah. I mean, we've been through the first
And this is-
redo, right?
Yeah. And we could, obviously have room for another person.
Mhm.
I think I'm interested in that.
Okay. Aaron is now on open space plan update.
That was
No,
Shauna.
that
Oh,
was Shauna.
Sorry, you sounded like Aaron.
If there's still an issue with Jason being on that, there's, I think, a bigger issue with me being on that. So.
And I'd be willing to, give up my space on maybe the tree issues committee if somebody wanted to, if Jason or Beck or
Actually-
Aaron wanted to take that up.
Shauna,
Yes.
I think with your background and knowledge, I think we kind of need you on that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I hate to say that, but
Nice
just-
try. Nice try.
Yeah. You owe us. You and
It's so
Michelle owe us a refund.
contentious.
Oh, just sneak out the back door, Shauna.
Or I'll just come after people with my string trimmer, my electric string trimmer.
you can come to my backyard with that.
I have one I can loan you.
I have.
Okay.
So it doesn't sound like we have an open space plan update. I guess we're still waiting on council.
Waiting for Karen to get that to council. And
Okay.
I'm trying to get that on.
But we have more after just that, then we should
Yeah.
start looking at some of the other stuff in the open space plan. So it's sort of an ongoing ad hoc.
Yeah, do you guys want to schedule a meeting, or do you want to wait till you've got some feedback from council?
On the open space plan update, I
Yeah.
think we need to take one bite at a time because
Okay.
we don't want to overload Karen. She's got a pretty damn full plate. And we
Yeah,
need to get this first one done. And Karen, any feedback you have for us that where we can go back and revise, let us know. We're on it.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that. Thank you.
Mhm.
all right, Crocker Trail Frog Habitat.
I have a little bit of an update, I guess. The subcommittee showed me what they had, and I talked to staff and the city manager and public works director, and I was asked to contact fire. So they are incorporating, at least for now, in their communication with fire, that their weed abatement letter tells the property owner to leave that area as it is, and that we will be, I don't know if his letter's not going to say, but we still have to do the outreach, the staff level with that property owner about what the proposal is, but at least they're not going to weed whack it. Fire does want us to trim the weeds on Crocker Trail and on the other side, the south side, but that shouldn't be in conflict at all with this area.
Thank you, Karen. That's excellent.
Great.
That's
That's
excellent.
good news.
Great progress.
Yeah.
Yay. Thank you.
Is that all for you, Karen?
Yeah.
That one? Okay. Dark skies ordinance. We have been, we've thrown the corn in the mill and we're grinding. We got some really good, but also some pretty niggly feedback from staff, and but a lot of it was very good and on point. So with Aaron and me and Michelle, we're just working our way through the document.
Now this one, I feel like I'm not a big contributor other than being, no, you have to do that. You have to do that. So I don't know if this is another one where anyone else wants to take that slot. It's important. It's very important. But I was kind of late to the game. Aaron, you've been a tremendous contributor so far. And Barbara, you're just stellar on this. So this is one that I would give up if someone else was hot for it.
Do we have anybody who would like to displace Michelle on Dark Skies? I mean, I kind of feel like you should stay with it, Michelle, because we've had a little problem with continuity on that subcommittee. And I think, bringing
Okay.
the ship home is I
Yep.
don't think a last minute change of staff is really to our,
Okay.
we're really
I'll-
close to being done.
Okay.
Did we skip invasive? Am I on that now? And
Yes.
Michelle-
Yes,
You
sorry.
are.
Good. Yay.
My
Yay.
Take my
Great.
name off that.
Tree issues. Shauna, I'm going to say the same thing to you. I don't think, we're kind of at a critical space. I don't think a change of staff would be really, and I have a great deal of horticultural expertise. I've taken classes. I have thousands of hours of practical experience, but I'm not an expert. Council and staff has let me know this repeatedly because I don't have a degree in it. So,
This one's hard because I want to stay on it because I have a vision that I feel I need to work through.
yes.
Michelle,
think
weren't we
you're-
gonna have like a little two-person chat about this at some point?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
Staff, could you maybe send out a reminder to Michelle and Shauna just to kind of help them stay on track? It's so hard with our full-time lives to remember to schedule something. I'd really appreciate it if you did that. Take that on, Adrian. I think it would help us. Or sorry, Karen. I always forget the Karens this one.
I can text myself, but I don't even have much to write on. I did not come very prepared.
Karen, when you get back from vacation, we'll just do it.
You can just put, right in the frost on your
Put it
glass.
on my calendar. On my calendar.
I'll put it in the notes, but I was just slightly distracted for a moment because it looked like we had a member of the public who joined and raised their hand and then they disappeared. So I didn't quite get what the ask was.
That would get you excited. That would get me excited.
Wait, what?
You know what? Maybe Zoom is just being mean, because maybe it's not just kicking me out.
I don't know. We haven't had any, since Aaron joined the committee, we haven't had any visitors.
Yeah.
You stole our audience.
Yeah, I was hoping Napala would join us, but yeah.
Well, I do want to talk to him about tree issues because he's got some really, he's very passionate about it and has some really good ideas. So we do need to maybe reel him in as a citizen participant on that.
And Adrian was going to answer that question at some point, whether or not we can have, like, how much input we can have from citizens who are not on the committee or subcommittee during the actual sausage phase. Whitman Science Fair judging, I don't think we really need to talk about that right now. We're sort of between, oh no, actually, yeah, did those, Mary, did those certificates get out?
I got the certificates. I had some little special stickers that I put on the certificates. I framed them and I brought them up to the school.
Great.
Probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. Yeah.
So that one's done for another year.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Does anybody have anything they'd like to go over or contribute or follow up on that I missed?
I'm only on 2 subcommittees, though I will admit that both of them were extremely busy this month, Dark Skies and Climate Action Plan. But I feel like I could take another. I'm wondering if Shauna wants to give up invasive species, because she mentioned that a little bit last month. But if not, I will just wait it out.
No, go ahead. I mean, yes, take it.
Woohoo, thank you.
All right.
I'm willing to give up events. If anybody wants events.
Wait, I still have 5.
I know, I have 5 too. So
I have 5.
not including the Baylands. So yeah.
I think we're all pretty equal right now. So that's good. We're all pulling our weight.
Okay, on events though, I expect everybody to participate in that one.
Yes.
A day in the park in particular.
Do we know what day of the month that is yet?
It'll be the first Saturday in October.
Okay, I'll put it on my calendar down. Thank you.
It's the first Saturday. I wanted to provide a little bit of an update on recycled arts and crafts contest. So we did not put a promo to start that in the Star for May, partially because we wanted to discuss and do it right, and also because we had a bunch of other things that were going in the Star environmentally. So I talked with Sarah from the Park and Rec Department last week about how we could drum up some interest in the contest. We saw a really great response in 2020 when everybody was home with not a lot of things to do, perhaps, and it went downhill quite a bit. We thought last year the submissions were much fewer. So we would like to figure out how we can kind of increase participation. Sarah had a few suggestions, and we've had a few suggestions that came from others last year. So the first is that we're going to be talking with the Youth Advisory Committee at their meeting next week. I'm going to join them. The meeting is on Wednesday, the 4th at, I believe, 6 o'clock or maybe 6:30. If anyone else is interested in joining me to talk with YAC about this and other ideas they have for climate and environmental actions, I would welcome that. So we're going to be doing that. And then the other thought was having a workshop or possibly multiple workshops over the summer, probably in the July-August timeframe. This was actually a suggestion that came from Lisa Greenlee, who won the contest the first year and helped us judge the contest last year. She's on the Park and Rec Commission. And she, basically had suggested that we have a kind of workshop similar to the Star Building workshops, if anybody participated in those that the city held, where, we might have materials, we might consider holding it in the library maker space. Couple different ways that we could potentially structure something like that, but just have something that kind of provided some support for people to get ideas or help to execute their ideas. So those are some of the things that we are thinking about and would like feedback on. I think this is actually something that falls under the events subcommittee. So perhaps after we talk with the YAC, we'll schedule a subcommittee meeting to talk through their feedback and see how folks want to proceed. The other thing we talked about was, I think Michelle had suggested in the past having projects displayed at Day in the Park and maybe having like a People's Choice Award or something like that. So we might incorporate that in the timeline and perhaps build some interest in participation from people knowing that their projects are going to be viewed by the community at Day in the Park.
I think that's excellent feedback, Adrian. Send me a note about when the YAC meeting is. I'll try to attend. And if we did have a, kind of Maker's Day kind of thing, I'm happy to share the mysteries of paper mache with people. But I just think it's really cool. And so, I'd like everyone in the committee to participate. We're all artists in our hearts.
Yeah, I'd probably volunteer. And we can have those jars with the beans for voting for projects, whatever. I'm down for supporting whatever the events subcommittee decides.
Erin's got her hand up.
Yes.
I have a two-part question. I believe last year we had people submit that weren't anywhere near the area, possibly from other countries. And
yes,
if we're going to keep with that business model, perhaps we should also let the Ecology Artist in Residence program current and past participants know, because they're already geared towards making art out of trash, recycling, and whatever else. We might get some really cool stuff out of them.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't actually open to them. It was just like a cute, funny thing that we had some submissions from India. But I don't think they're eligible to win.
Yeah, we kind of mentioned them in like our article, and thanked them for participating, but that was about the extent of that. We effectively said, sorry, we're not going to ship our like small prizes from Scavenger and local gift cards halfway around the world. But I think it's worth, maybe subcommittee can discuss, outside of town, but not other side of the world, where we draw the line on who's eligible to participate and whether folks from Ecology Artists in Residence.
Well, that's a good point. You could live or work in Brisbane. So Ecology's in Brisbane. So maybe that does fly. It's up to you guys. Calendar, I think we're done. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, we're moving on to calendar items.
I don't know that I have a whole lot to really say on the calendar item that we haven't already discussed. We talked about the recycled arts and crafts, the Habitat Day, coastal cleanup day in the park. The May star that will be going out soon has a divestment article that Glenn wrote. So thank you again, Glenn, for doing that. And then building efficiency program deadline reminder, and continuing to have something about SB 1383 in virtually every star that we send out, probably throughout the whole year.
Bike day.
Bike to Wherever. They've officially changed the name. It is no longer Bike to Work Day. It's Bike to Wherever Day. Changed under the pandemic, and I think it sounds like they're sticking with it.
And what's the date? And what are we
saw it
doing?
recently, and I did not. I meant to update.
Whenever, bike to wherever.
To some extent, yes.
Well, May's coming up and we haven't done, I mean, this has not fallen in the, well, it says events, but I've never participated in it.
I will be honest, this is largely a Park and Rec.
Okay,
A what?
Park and Rec.
Park and Rec usually.
No, it's an OSEC thing.
Well, I'll be honest, I have not done anything to plan for it in my entire time working for the city. It's always been done by Park and Rec staff. May 20th, 2022.
Okay.
May 20th.
All right. Cool.
But Barbara, I know you volunteered on this before,
Yeah. I mean,
so I hope you will again. But now you're working full time, so that's kind of makes it a little harder.
yeah, I don't think I can. We'll have to see. Unfortunately, my calendar's not with me, so we'll have to see if it's May 20th, what day of the week that is.
May 20th is a Friday.
Okay, yeah, that's gonna be hard for me. And
Um,
my computer's not responding. Erg.
So are there people who might be available to participate that day? And do you want to outline what it is? Or Adrian, do you want to send us a note about it or?
I can get some info from, I think Ricardo might be the staff that is working on that, or at least he was in the past. So I can get some info and share that around.
Okay.
Okay. All right, chair and member matters.
One of these days we need to update this picture, but I'm not sure how up for it people are feeling right now. So, we get back to in person. Everybody send me your favorite headshot. I don't know how we want to do that, but I'm feeling like Zoom screenshot right now isn't maybe.
Okay, is there anything else on chair and committee matters besides our bad pictures?
So did you ask us to send you headshots or did we already do, are you doing that now or?
Well, let's go.
Okay, fine.
If anybody cares, we can just leave this with the old committee picture until we actually have it in person.
Yes,
Okay, great.
let's let
No, I
it go.
tried to get it updated once, but that's fine. Let's move on. Next meeting,
May 25th.
May 25th. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Beat you to it, Jason.
All right. Third. Fourth.
See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Motion
Thank
carried.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
Have a good
Bye.
night.
Bye.
Text me, Michelle.
Thanks, everybody.